Finding the Lego by Maryann Corbett. You find it when you're tearing up your life, trying to make some sense of the old messes. Moving dressers, peering under beds, almost lost in cat hair and in cobwebs, in dust you vaguely know was once your skin. It shows up, isolated, fragmentary, a tiny little solid, tractable, knob to be fitted in a lockstep pattern with others. Plastic, red, or blue, or yellow, out of the dark, undamaged, there it is, as bright and primary colored and foursquare as a family with 2 parents and 2 children who moved in 20 years ago in a dream. It makes no allowances, concedes no failures, admits no knowledge of the little girl, glared through tears, rubbing her slapped cheek. Rigidity is its essential trait. Likely as not, you leave it where it was. The poem Finding the Lego by Maryann Corbett is narrated in second person and tells a tale of finding a representation of the past. The Lego in this poem represents the past, as throughout the poem, Corbett implies that it was continuously built upon and, quote, almost lost, unquote, as Corbett states in the 4th line. I think it's important to note that the poem is in second person because it signifies that the persona, who in this case is Maryann Corbett herself, is talking to a general audience. Before moving on to the analyzation of the poem, I would like to explain the photos and video clips I used in my movie. I thought it would be crucial, especially for this project in particular, to personalize the movie as much as possible, while still incorporating elements of the poem. I chose to be filmed in the movie in order to convey this to the audience. In my first clip, I wanted to start off as if it was a diary entry. I thought it would be a good idea to start off with this in the movie because the first line of the poem is so personal, and I thought that this idea should be relayed in any actions that I do in the movie. In the second and third clips, it gets even more personal, as these clips they correspond to Corbett's second line, quote, trying to make sense of the old messes, unquote. In these clips, the audience can see me going on Facebook and looking through old messages with an old friend. I think these particular clips are important in the poem because it embodies the idea of relatability, which is a motive throughout the poem. We live in a very technological age, so the idea of going on Facebook is normal. But the relatability of this scene comes in when I'm going through the old Facebook messages. Usually people don't really go through their Facebook messages unless they have something that they're looking for, something that they want to relive, and that's what I wanted to put into my movie. As I continue reading the poem, there comes a point where isolation is mentioned. I think this particular point of the poem is important for a few reasons. One of them being that the idea of relatability comes up again, and another reason being that isolation can be seen as another motif in the poem. For the isolation photo, I used a picture from one of Taylor Swift's old videos where the spotlight is on her and she's at a party. Although in this case, the spotlight isn't on her in a good way. She is isolated. Other people around her are having fun, they're enjoying themselves, but she is left out. This again contributes to the motif of relatability because there's been a point in all of our lives when we have felt out of place, whether it was at home or at school or on a sports team. It's a component of life, and it's unavoidable. Isolation is first seen in the title, Finding the Lego. It's not finding Legos. I think that's also important for this poem. This motif of isolation is carried on throughout the poem. An example of this is in the middle of the poem, when Corbett insinuates that even through the, quote, the dark, unquote, past will be the same as she states undamaged. In this clip, I used a photo of a man standing in a dark tunnel towards the entrance where light was visible. I think this part of the poem is an example of isolation because I think Corbett is implying that the past is isolated. Although it might not make much sense, think about it. I personally agree with this idea. Isolated means to be in one place or alone, but I think the memories that I hold are similar to a bunch of puzzle pieces that just don't fit together. They're just not meant to fit together. They're meant to be by themselves, individual, unique. In the following line, Corbett talks about the bright primary colors that are as foursquare as a family mentioned in the poem. I think these two lines contrast each other quite a bit. In the previous line, Corbett talks about the darker side of the past and how it cannot be altered, while in this line, after she talks about the primary colors that are foursquare, there is a contrast. There's a contrast because the past cannot be altered, while primary colors can be mixed into each other in order to create different colors. Corbett uses several literary techniques throughout the poem. For example, imagery, similes, and tone. But the literary technique that can be seen all throughout the poem is enjambment. Corbett's use of enjambment is vital throughout the poem as it contributes heavily to the overall understanding. For example, towards the end of the poem, in lines 14 to 16, quote, "It makes no allowances, concedes no failures, admits no knowledge of a little girl who glared through tears, rubbing her slapped cheek," unquote. In this sequence of lines, there's usage of commas, but only one period. If this section did not use enjambment, the message would be very different. An example of this is in line 16, "who glared through tears rubbing her slapped cheek." Now, if enjambment hadn't been used in the line before, it would be, "who glared through tears rubbing her slapped cheek." The change is visible, or audible in this case. Instead of line 16 being a statement, it would be a question without the use of enjambment. The use of enjambment is also extremely important as it contributes to the tone used throughout the poem.